To Wright-Locke Farm, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Kim Nealand, and I'm our Community Engagement Manager here at Wright-Locke Farm. Just curious, tonight, I keep asking this at each speaker series session, how many people have never been to Wright-Locke Farm before today? Great, awesome. Well, welcome. Glad to have you here today. We've got a couple seats for you over here if you'd like. We just got started, so no worries. But yeah, thank you for coming out tonight. This is the third session. We've been having a really great time with the speaker series this season so far. And we've been so lucky to have some really great presenters who are generous with their time and enthusiastic and so knowledgeable. And we are also being recorded by WinCam tonight. Thank you again, WinCam. You've been great so far. So we're actually going to be able to make this session available later on in the season. So, you can reference this talk. But before we jump into the presentation, I just wanted to say, again, thank you to our presenters, especially Connor tonight. We are really lucky to have these great sources of knowledge with us. And what's really exciting to us at Wright-Locke Farm is that we're able to provide it for free to the public. And so I was actually just out at the NOFA conference this weekend, Northeast Organic Farming Association, and while I was being bludgeoned by so much information, and it was just an awesome thing, you're surrounded by these really, really experienced people and people wanting to learn more. It struck me that Wright-Locke Farm is a really cool place. It's a great place for an intersection. We've got an intersection of urban and rural, of a working farm and as well as an educational farm. And we have a ton of people who know a lot about farming and people coming from completely different backgrounds. There's just so many ways that people connect here with this farm that we're in a really unique position to reach such a broad audience. And I think this is a real strength of Wright-Locke Farm because we're going to be able to share really vitally important information with our community in a time that, it's so important to come together and collaborate and, work side by side to tackle our future. So I'm just really excited for what Wright-Locke's going to be able to do. And so we're looking down the line, and one of those things, I just wanted to let you in on, a growing secret or less of a secret. You probably saw some of the big posters coming in. We have big plans to create an education center here at Wright-Locke Farm, and we're going to be starting that campaign soon. And basically, this education center is going to allow us to run year-round, almost double our programming, basically create a lot more opportunities for underserved groups, as well as finally adding a commercial kitchen to our educational toolkit. So that's really exciting. And, this space, we're viewing it as a real resource for the community and a place of cooperation. And so I'm not going to talk too much more about this. So there's literature out. Please grab that on your way out and, ask us questions and get involved because this space is going to be for all of us. Just imagine, a speaker series throughout the wintertime when it's heated and, not freezing cold in here. It'd be great. But back to the presentation tonight. We have an excellent talk for you by Connor Stedman, who is the principal and head designer at AppleSeed Permaculture. As an ecological designer and educator in regenerative agriculture, he helps farms adapt to and mitigate climate change all around North America. He serves as head faculty at the Omega Institute's Ecological Literacy Immersion Program and as a professional affiliate instructor of the University of Vermont's Leadership for Sustainability program. He received his Master's of Science in Ecological Planning from the University of Vermont and is the lead organizer of the internationally recognized carbon farming course. Connor has been working here at Wright-Locke Farm with us for the last year to help us create a master plan for how we can better adapt our operations to this unique landscape and ever-changing weather and the needs of also a growing community-based farm. Without further ado, I will give you guys off to Connor, and it's a pleasure to have you back on the farm again. So,
all right, well, it's good to see your faces tonight. Thank you for coming out on this beautiful, balmy summer evening. Amazing time of year in this part of the world. And here we are in an open barn with a lot of history and memory in it. So it's great to be gathered together around thinking about this place and its future, and maybe a little bit about where it came from also. But so thanks for that really kind introduction, Kim. That was much too much to praise with. But I have had the real honor to work with Kim and Archie and all the farmers and staff and educators here over the last 8 months or so on a thought process about this land and a design process emerging out of that thought process about the future of this land and how some important objectives that Wright-Locke Farm holds can be achieved here that are also connected to some larger needs and imperatives that exist in our world right now. So we're gonna have a little like, what would you say? A little it's not quite a buffet platter because everyone's getting the same thing, but kind of one of those big family meals where there's a lot in the center, and we're gonna taste different things from different parts of it here tonight, because I do want to speak about this work around agroforestry that's happening around the planet and has a long history, and it has a real important role, I think, for where we're headed. But I also want to speak about this place here, and I know that it's a place that a lot of you know and love really well. Who's had a long relationship with Wright-Locke Farm here? Yeah, good handful of you. And who again is it here for their first time? Okay, great. And who is somewhere in the middle between those two? That might be the largest group. Perfect. All right. Well, so, and again, just to give a little bit of background, I work as a ecological designer and farm planner, doing this type of work that you're going to see some examples of tonight for here. Trying to engage this question between what are we doing locally on the ground, and how is that connected to and a part of these larger global systems that we're part of, and these larger systemic shifts and changes that are needed for all life to thrive into the future on the planet. So I'm very interested in that connection and intersection between the small scale and the large scale. And I hope we'll get a taste of that here this evening. Yeah, please do ask a question if you got one. And I might say, let's save that question till later because we're getting around to it and it might be the perfect moment. So please do raise your hand if you need to. So I liked this picture because it has people and it has a goat, actually several goats, and it has a view. And there's such an interesting landscape happening here at Wright-Locke. And I know that for some people, the farm core is really the home base of this place. It's where the chickens are and where the farm stand is and where a lot of the interactions with the community happen. And then for some people, it's actually the production farm fields where a lot of the vegetables are grown. And for other people, it's that beautiful spot up on the hill back here. People have gotten married there, and you get this big expansive view, kind of like this, but from further back. And then for some people, they're actually coming from the conservation area side, and all that wildland is actually kind of the main event. And then, oh, there's a farm over there? Who's in that category? Who's only recently discovered this place in continuity with a bigger landscape that you know? Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to have this conserved land in a corridor. And that's one of the things that I hope we'll get to touch on here tonight is the connectivity of this landscape. So I want to just pose a question as we begin, and God help me, we'll be done in an hour, but I don't know if that's quite possible. So we'll do as much as we can. But I want to just pose a question of when we begin of where are we? What is this place where we are here? Who lives in Winchester? Who lives in a one-town radius from Winchester? Okay, who lives farther afield? Okay, great. A couple of visitors, a couple of friends from afar. That's great. What comes to your mind when you think about where are we?
Mystic Lakes.
The Mystic Lakes. Oh, that's really interesting. Why are they called the Mystic Lakes?
The origin of that word is not really solid.
Not solid, right? Yeah.
Mystic River, Mystic Lakes.
Yeah, competing interpretations. Okay.
Mystic River watershed.
Okay, yeah, the Mystic River. Yeah, very interesting little river. What's something else that comes to someone's mind about where we are?
The coast of the Atlantic Ocean.
The coast of the Atlantic Ocean. Atlantic Ocean, yeah. Yeah, an ocean that has changed quite a bit over the Earth's history, as we'll see in a minute. And the history of why it's called the Atlantic Ocean is a very interesting investigation to go down also.
It has to do with the lost city of Atlantis, right?
It has to do with Atlantis, yes. There was a mindset at the time when some of the first European colonizers were coming here that they were going to find Atlantis. And because there's a lot of old stories about the lost continent far to the west. So yeah, very interesting. What's something else that comes to your mind?
Hills.
Hills, right, this bumpy landscape. You can even see it on the farm here. There's 4 or 5 distinct landforms that rise up just on this one little property. Yeah, and all across this region it's like that. And let's actually take a look at that here. So lo and behold, that was not planned. So this is actually, what you said is exactly right, but this is actually from a period much earlier than that. So this is from, so people have heard of this supercontinent Pangaea, but there was a previous era of supercontinents prior to that called Rodinia. And so this is the origins of the Atlantic Ocean are this moment in geologic time right here, when the supercontinent Rodinia was breaking up. And there's our proto-Massachusetts right there. And so we were nicely underwater at that point in time, 550 million years ago. And this was called the Iapetus Ocean, or it's called now by people who look backwards in time. But you might notice that the whole, everything's rotated, so that actually was north at that time. This was a south-facing coastline back in the beginnings of this being the Atlantic coast. Okay, and then, a bunch of things happened in the next 200 million years that I'm going to skip over, including the collision of some of these volcanic island chains that ended up moving into the coast and uplifted what's now called the Taconic Mountains, which at that time were as high as the Himalaya. But none of that affects us quite yet. That's just sort of backdrop, because then about 200 million years later, this ocean began to close again. And it began to close with Proto-Africa approaching Proto-North America. And at that time, you can see most of North America was actually underwater in this shallow inland sea. So a lot of the bedrocks of the western United States were laid down sedimentary during this time. And this mountain chain of the Taconic Mountains that had been previously made by those volcanic island chains, and now these tectonic plates are coming closer, and so this collision of tectonic plates was the Akkadian mountain building event. And that word Acadia is another very interesting history of people and place and memory and culture that is a whole rabbit hole we could go down another evening. And this whole province people have referred to as Avalonia, this whole line of geologies that stretched from what's now New England all the way to what's now Northern Europe. But, the land that lies to the west of us, what's now called the Berkshires and Taconic Hills and parts further west, was significantly shaped and formed during this period of time. But we still weren't quite landed in this ground yet at this point in time. It took the closure of the Iapetus Ocean into Pangaea, which is exactly what our friend was referring to over here, with Africa colliding with North America, forming one continent around the whole world. This is what shaped the ground right now. And so a lot of these granites and other igneous and metamorphosed igneous rocks were formed in magmatic and volcanic activity during this continental collision. And then now keep in mind how long we're talking about here. I mean, that was 100 million years since the previous slide. And so it looks like everything's in continual motion, but the continual motion is like that parable of the Buddha about a bird flying with a silk cloth over the top of Mount Everest and just flicking off one speck of rock. Billions of years, not that much, but he was talking about reincarnation, of course. That's a whole different trip. But so 100 million years, another 100 million years go by. By the way, we still are not yet in the time of the dinosaurs right now. This is pre-Triassic period. right now. This is the time of giant pre-dinosauric lizards and proto-amphibians, and this is when this is towards the latter end of when a lot of the coal beds were laid down in some of that previous shallow sea we were looking at. And so there was all these carboniferous swamps at this time, and there was dragonflies that had wingspans that were 6 feet across. And a lot of wild stuff was going on then. So in the 500 years, then this interesting thing began to happen where Africa moved back. And this is all related to the convection of currents of molten rock that encircle the Earth under the crust, that are shaped by factors including the Earth's magnetic field and that giant ball of iron at the Earth's core. We really live on a quite extraordinary planet. I don't know if you've seen evidence of that today or not, but it's really very amazing. And that ball of iron at the Earth's core is spinning inside of the planet in such a way to make these currents of magma flow. I mean, a lot of this stuff is just from 5th grade science class, but I didn't quite have the impact when it went in first. So the Atlantic reopened, and now here we are. And you're exactly right that this time the ocean level was higher, so we were submerged for a while. But this land was left behind by Africa on Africa's travel back to its in the world now. And this is during the time of the dinosaurs, by the way. And then a whole bunch of interesting things happened, including some of we will not go into too great detail, except to say that they led to the advance sheets from the north. And so these ice sheets had so much water in them that the world's oceans were hundreds of feet lower than they are now. And they were so thick that the weight of that ice pressed the Earth's crust down into its molten mantle by hundreds of feet as well. And so that actually there's parts of Quebec today that are still rebounding from the release of that weight from the melting of those last glaciers in northern Quebec. And the eventual disappearance and retreat of those ice sheets left a landscape that would be very hard for us to recognize today. Here, it's a lot of bare soil and a lot of rock and a lot of chaos and a lot of giant channels of water and stone and gravel and a huge line of glacial rubble called Cape Cod, and a lot of other things. But as soon as that land was re-inhabited by plants and re-inhabited by animals, it was also inhabited for perhaps the first time by people. And so I want to remember the original people of the land, because some of them are still here, and they've had a really rough time over the last half millennia. And it's not be inaccurate to say that everything that we have and enjoy in the United States has come at their expense. So we are in the traditional territory of Massachusetts people. And these are largely on this map all Algonquin language speaking people. They had distinct languages, but were neighbors and cousins and relatives in a sense, culturally and linguistically, and had complex networks of trade and relationship with each other, and cultures going back 10, 12, 14,000 years in this place ever since the glaciers retreated. And there's a very heavy period of time that involved a lot of genocide here, and involved a lot of forced relocations and a lot of gnarly things that are still being played out in the world in different ways now, including sometimes to those people and their descendants. So we want to remember, though, whose land we're on. And we also, as you all wisely said, are in the Mystic River watershed. So it's a very interesting little water, not very large. It's a very small area that it drains, but it drains through one of the most densely populated the country, and some of the most rapidly urbanized places of the world. This ring of land, like surrounding Boston, where there we are, right there. This ring of land, as recently as the 1930s, was all farmland, and there was actually truck farms and cart farms all over this landscape that were growing vegetables that were carted and later by automobile into Boston every day. And they had giant glass greenhouses where they were growing, they're doing season extension and growing 9, 10 months of the year, 80, 90, 100 years ago. So there's a really, really rich agricultural tradition here that has largely disappeared from the landscape in a relatively short amount of time. And so Wright-Locke is a living continuation of that tradition. And it's also I think because of how rapidly that form of land use has gone, I think that a place like this has a real responsibility to carry for preserving some of that memory, like in this beautiful barn and with these incredible old tools and carts and wagons and wheels, but also with the farming practices and the knowledge of the land that lives in the communities of farmers. And there's some interesting aerial photography that we can see that shows some of that history. So this is 1931 on this place, and wow, look at all that farmland. Amazing. And and very little forest, just surrounding some of that lake to our north, and actually you can see up on this hilltop, you can see the apple orchard that historically was there, and those rows of trees. And then you fast forward 70 or so years, 2003, and now. But actually, there are aerial photos from the mid-1990s that still show the remnants of the apple orchard. And some of you might remember that from decades past if you've been coming here for a long time. So here we are on this land, and with the recent joining of these two parcels into a managed whole, not a single parcel, but a distinctness managed by different entities of people between the Farm Conservancy and the Conservation Commission and a lot of different land stewards and growers. So we're going to explore the design process tonight that focus on this land and this place. But Archie also, in our conversations about this evening, we wanted to make sure to speak to some of the larger global imperatives that surround the work of agriculture right now. Because agriculture, as you may know, is in crisis globally. And that is of particular interest to all human beings. Most humans in the world depend on agriculture, including just about all of us. And that the global crisis of agriculture has a lot of different sources and origins, but every aspect of it is being made more challenging by climate change. And so just want to take a square look for a second at the situation we're in around climate change, because the 20th century is not coming back. We're not going to get the conditions that we grew up in ever again. We're living on a different planet with fundamentally different conditions. And it's going to take a level of adaptability and jump into itness and cooperation that maybe we haven't been forced into yet. At least a lot of those of us in the global north. So this was Hurricane Sandy, and one of the many predicted and observed effects of climate change is increased frequency and severity of hurricanes in the North Atlantic because of increased water temperatures. A lot of the excess heat right now is being absorbed by the Earth's oceans, and that's having an outsized effect on marine life, but it's also changing the way ocean currents work and the way the weather works, because the weather systems of the world are substantially driven by the oceans. So we're going to get more, and they're going to be big, and they're going to be different than the ones we remember from our childhood, and we have to figure out what to do about that. So I want to bring to your awareness two really significant pieces of work that have been released in the last 2 years related to this situation we're in. So one of them is this book, The Carbon Farming Solution, which was written by my good friend Eric Tonesmeyer. I helped a little bit with some of the research of it. And essentially, if you zoom and think about climate change in a big picture way, there's a large pool of surplus carbon in the atmosphere that has been released. About half of it has been released from fossil fuels, and about half of it has been released from land degradation, from deforestation and tillage and urbanization and desertifying soils and all those things. And that large pool amounts to a increase in carbon concentration in the Earth's atmosphere from about 280 parts per million 250 years ago to about 410 parts per million now. It's an almost 50% increase in the CO2 concentration in just 250 years. And in order to forestall the most significant consequences of climate change